Well, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, whichever time of day it is for you as we're gathered here together. Our topic today is listening to God, which is different from when do I feel God or when do I experience God's presence. It's a little bit more specific than that, the listening to God. I have a quote from the comedian Lily Tomlin who says, "Why is it then when we speak to God, we're said to be praying, but when God speaks to us, we're said to be schizophrenic?" Well, our Bible is filled with stories of God speaking to humans. From the very beginning in Genesis, when God asks Adam, "Adam, where are you?" all the way to the last book of Revelations, where God says, "Surely I am coming soon." You know, one of my personal favorites about God speaking is from 1 Kings, verses 11 through 13, when God is speaking to Elijah. Elijah has been fleeing Jezebel, and he fears for his life. He's really ready just to give up and die, but he doesn't, and he ends up in a cave on a mountain, and he hears the Lord say, "Go out and stand before the mountain, for the Lord is about to pass by." And as the story goes on, the Lord was not in the wind. The Lord was not in the subsequent earthquake or the subsequent fire, but he spoke in the sheer silence that followed. And that appeals to me because I like to have my times of silence. I like to expectantly hope that I'll hear a word from God when I'm in silence. The New Testament is also filled with stories of God speaking, like at Jesus' baptism when there is a voice from above that says, "This is my beloved Son." In Acts, when Jesus was in heaven, he spoke to Saul, and said, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" These are dramatic displays, and we often get caught up in the experience of what's going on with God rather than hearing what God has to say. And there are certainly many skeptics who will say, "Well, these are just myths and it's make-believe. There's no proof." However, these claims of hearing God speak don't stop at just Bible stories. Throughout history, there have been other significant Christian figures, such as the saints, St. Teresa, St. Thomas, the Reformers, Luther, Calvin, Wesley, Martin Luther King Jr., who claim to have heard from God and from Jesus, and they say they heard a voice. Are these myths? Are these people just misguided or mistaken or just wishing that they could hear God? Well, the more personal question is, do we today, do you, do I hear the voice of God? Do we hear a message in our head sometimes and wonder, is that just me? Is that just my voice talking to myself inside my head? Or is it something else? Is it perhaps a word from God? I have to confess that I am much too much like Gideon in the book of Judges when he says, "Show me a sign that it is you who speak with me." So I conclude that doubt and uncertainty actually seem to be part of God's communications with us. And that can set us on our own personal journey to discover if the word or the message that we heard was for me or from me. So, how does God speak to us? How am I to discern the voice of God? Many groups that I have worked with have answered this question with a number of examples, often through other people. I love the stories of pastors when they say that they have delivered a sermon and someone comes up to them after the sermon and says, oh, that really meant so much to me. And then the person will go on to relate what they heard being said, and the pastor will swear up and down. He'll go back and look at his notes, or she'll go back and look at her notes and say, to themselves, I never said that. I wonder what that person needed to hear. Sometimes we hear God through the voice of our friends, of neighbors, of family members. Sometimes we hear the voice of God through music, through classes. And what about the holy nudges that we get? When have you had the time of thinking, I need to pick up the phone and text so-and-so, or call so-and-so, or check on so-and-so? Or you'll call someone and say, you just came to mind, and you'll find out that that person either had a need, was thinking about you, or maybe you just needed to hear their voice. Clearly, we get to hear the voice of God through the Bible, whether we're reading the Bible by ourselves, whether we're in a Bible study, whether we're in a Zoom meeting. And clearly, we can hear the voice of God in silence and in prayer. Because you see, part of what happens, we have to be willing to hear God, and we have to be willing to show up in the places where God can communicate with us. So as we close today's session, let's have a prayer. Dear God, thank you for seeking us, leading us, and for talking to us tenderly and lovingly. As the hymn says, and you walk with me, and you talk with me, and you tell me I am your own. Amen. And amen. See you next time.